Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Ike's Outdoors. On today's episode, we are going to be working on our used bow build, and what we're going to be doing is installing our Peep sight and getting it set up, and we're going to be getting our our cord installed in it, and we're going to be going ahead and getting it timed. So those are the two things we're going to do in our next step of our bow build. Now, when it comes to Peep sights, everyone has a little bit of a preference as far as size and what brand and things like that. I like just a 3/16 Peep sight. Doesn't really matter to me what it is. I don't like the tube style Peep sights because I think they're loud and they have a tendency to break on you. So what I'm going to be using is basically a 3/16. I believe it's made by True Glow, which is a 3/16 Peep sight that's going to set in my string right up here. So that's going to be the Peep sight. We're also going to be installing this cable, and this is what controls our rest right here, is the up and down motion of our rest, and we're going to be putting that in our down cable of our bowstring. One easy way to tell if you have a roller guard is if the serving goes up, it means the string goes down. If the serving goes down, it means the string goes up. You can also look at your cams and figure out what happens when your string is pulled back, and you can tell which one is the up or down. Or you can actually just take your bow and kind of give it a pull, and you can see, don't pull it back all the way, but just kind of give it a tug, and you can see which one goes up and which one goes down. But a general rule is, if this part's served, if it goes up, if the serving goes up, the string goes down. If the serving goes down, the string goes up. So we're going to go ahead and grab that Peep and get it installed and get our cord installed, and then we'll start on the timing process. Now, I got this bow pressed, and I didn't go over the kind of press that I'm using or anything like that, because you guys really need to follow the directions on your particular bow and use the press that it comes with, and use the press that press it in the proper manner so that it doesn't mess up your bow. You can really mess up a set of limbs by doing this improperly. So on a 2-color string, it's pretty dang easy to get this installed. We've got our 3/16 P pin here. What I'm going to do, for me, I just untwist it a little bit, and I may have to press that a little more. Put another turn on it, turn and a half. So what we're going to end up doing is just pulling that string. I like to just unwind it and take my thumbnail. You can take your string separator if you want to, but I just take my thumbnails and pull it apart just like that. Now I can see that I've got a little bit of orange on the black side, so I'm just going to work those down until they're all on the same side. Black on one side, orange on the other. This is really handy to have a 2-color string. If you just have a solid color string, you just got to kind of guess, you know, what's 50% and go from there. So we're going to go ahead and we've got our orange on one side and our black on one side, and we're going to go ahead and put our Peep in there just like that. Now, at this point, I am not going to serve that Peep in. What we're going to do is we're going to go out, when we're timing our rest, we're also going to pay attention to this Peep sight. We're going to make sure we got the rotation correct, and we're going to make sure we got the elevation correct in it before we start messing with serving this thing in. Now, I'm going to go ahead, and at this point too, I'm going to untwist my down cable like we talked about before, and I'm going to install this in a location that the rest manufacturer suggests for this particular bow. And for the Hoyts, it's kind of high. Normally on a binary cam or something like that, I would go down a little lower, but Hoyt suggests that you put it a little bit higher than normal. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to get all our orange on one side and all our black on one side, and we're going to try not to break any strands, and we're just going to bring this through the back side and poke it through right there, if I can do it without getting my arm in front of the camera. The camera makes everything more difficult. Be careful with this. Just take your time and do it slowly and gently so that you don't bust some strands. This is when this string is the easiest to break. So we're going to go ahead and just pull that through Just like that. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and relax our bow, and we're going to take it outside, and we're going to start pulling the thing back until we get our rest timed and our peep sight set in the right position. Alright, so this might be difficult to do and to film. First thing I'm going to concentrate on right now is getting my rest set up and getting the elevation set up and getting it timed. So what I've done is, according to the manufacturer of this rest, I've pulled out approximately the length that they suggest. I've put it in a location that they suggest. And what I'm going to do at this point is basically I'm just going to go ahead and draw the bow back and see what the rest needs to be done to it. Now, there's a pretty simple rule on this. If the rest comes up and engages early, comes to full draw early, then you need more slack. If you come to full draw and the rest only comes up partially, then you need to pull some of the slack out. So if it engages early, add more slack. If it doesn't engage, by the time you get to full draw, take some of the slack out. So I've got an arrow on this bow. Anytime you're pulling a bow back, you should always have an arrow on the bow. And I've got a safe backstop right here. I'm only about 3 yards away from the backstop. We're not doing any kind of shooting. So this is really more for safety precaution than it is anything. So at this point, I just want to pull the bow back, keep my finger away from the trigger, and see what that rest does. I can see already that it's going to be too... Yeah, doesn't put nearly enough. I put way too much slack in that thing. So we're gonna go ahead and let up and pull a lot of that slack out of there. So again, I noticed my peep sight was really low too, so I'm gonna move that way up. And this thing, this is the first time I pulled this bow back, so I'm not really used to the draw cycle or the poundage. And I went really slow when I pulled it back because I didn't want that. I'm really paying attention to the rest. So again, pointed in a safe direction, and it came up way too early. So I'm going to put a little bit of slack in there. We're just going to make small increments. I pulled out about a ½ inch that time. I'll do it again. And that is really close. I need just a little bit more slack in it. That draw length might be too long for me. May have to make some changes. So I pulled about a ¼ of an inch out of there. And we're going to go ahead and pull it back again with the rest in a down position. And just a little too much. Now, normally, I wouldn't fight it this much, but I want to make as many adjustments in front of the camera as I can. At least that's my excuse for not getting it right on the first try. And there we go. That time it popped up right as I came to full draw, so that is the position that I'm going to want it in. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to serve a little bit up here to keep this thing from sliding around. But for right now, what I'm going to do is just going to tie a square knot right in the back of that. And that should keep it in position. I'm going to put that square knot all the way up against the back of the string. So that square knot right there is going to keep it from pulling. So now I'm going to go ahead and pop the rest up in full draw, or in the full upright position, because I want to make sure that the thing is going to loosen up and that it's correct. So I'm going to pull it back. There, I saw it disengage, and I'm going to go ahead and let it down, and the rest went down. So we've got it timed right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the elevation and rotation of my peep sight. What I'm going to do with this, I've heard a lot of people say, close your eyes and draw the bow back. I never like to draw the bow back with my eyes closed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the bow back, I'm going to close my eyes, put my head in a natural position, and when I open my eyes, I should be looking directly through my peep sight. If not, I'm going to have to make some changes to the elevation of my peep sight, and maybe even the rotation of my peep sight as well. So I'm going to come to full draw. I'm going to get myself in my natural position, close my eyes, and that peep sight is really low. So I'm going to move that peep sight up about ½ an inch, and I may end up having to I actually ended up moving that thing up about 2 inches. And that's the problem with these Peeps that rotate. It's really hard to get them in the right position. And you're going to spend a lot more time putting that in the right position than you probably will anything else. So close my eyes, natural position, and open them. And it's just a little too high, so I'm going to move it back down. And at this point I can tell I'm already tell I'm going to have to move that Peep side. Okay, so that is not in the right position. If you had a buddy, you could have him twist that for you right now, but I don't have a buddy. So what I've got to do is I've got to try to get that thing to come into the right position for me when I come to full draw, so I can check and see if the elevation is correct. Okay, that is pretty damn good. That's pretty good for me. It looks like it's going to rotate out, so we're going to go ahead and put our serving above the rest here, and we're going to go ahead and serve this Peep side in. We'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we're going to see if we can keep this in focus here. And you'll see this is a pretty common problem with Peep sights and D-loops. There's a couple different ways that you can handle this. What happened is my Peep sight elevation is now in a good position. But that's really common with these kind of Peep sights, and it's something that you don't run into with the tube Peeps, is they actually pull this around to the right position every time. So that is the advantage that you have on the tube style Peeps. We may have a little trouble keeping this in focus too. It's just a little hard to focus on just a string. So my Peep sight is on this axis right here. My D-loop is on this axis right here. So we have it in two different positions. What I can do is one of two things. I can serve this thing in, and I can actually just let it go wherever it goes, or I can, and then at that point I can untie the D-loop, rotate it back around to where it's perfectly in line. Because what's going to happen is when I draw this bow back, you can see it's going to rotate that Peep around, so everything's not going to be lined up. The other thing I can do is when I serve it, I can wrap it two different directions. If I wrap it this way, it'll bring the Peep sight around like that. If I wrap it toward me, it'll bring the Peep sight around this way. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to try to serve this Peep sight in a way that actually pulls it around where it's in line with my D-loop. Now to do this, you're going to need to press this bow. So we're going to take a little bit of tension off this bow, and you'll see the string relax. And the reason you're going to need to do that is basically so you can pull that knot down nice and tight. When that is not relaxed, it's just going to be so tight that you're not going to be able to get a good knot right there. So what we're going to need to do this part is a couple pieces of string, or of serving material. This is 0.025. This is what I prefer for the serving, for your center serving. This one here is 0.019, I believe, so a little smaller, and this is what I use for my Peep sights and things like that. So the thicker material, it will work, but I just prefer it mostly for center serving. The thinner material will not work on center serving. Your knock will just fall all around the place and just be all over the place. So you definitely need that thicker serving material for the center. So I'm going to cut me off a generous piece of that. I'm going to cut off two lengths of my serving material, and the one that we're going to use to close the knot out, you can actually use that over and over again, so you're not wasting D-loop material. So what I'm going to do is try to keep this knot as simple as I can so you guys can see it. We're going to tie one continuous knot. So my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set myself a tail going right down toward my bottom cam. I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to wrap the serving right around that tail. Your first couple loops are going to be the hardest to get them started. After that, it is pretty easy. And I got to hang on to it, so I'll move my hand out of the way here in just a minute to show you guys exactly what I'm doing. Right now I'm just trying to get it started so it doesn't move all over the place. So you can see there what I'm doing is I'm covering that up. I'm just serving right over the top of that, and I'm going to pull this nice and tight now that I'm started, and I'm going to pull this nice and tight as I go. I want this to be a nice tight serving, so I'm just going to pull it really tight, and you can see by pulling this toward me that Peep sight and my string is actually rotating toward me as well, and hopefully it'll end up in line with my D-loop. So I'm going to do this about, I don't know, 8-10 wraps, maybe even as many as 12, and then I'm just going to pull my tail on the other side, and now I'm not wrapping over the tail, now I'm just wrapping over the string itself, and I'm just going to pull this nice and tight. I want that Peep sight locked into place, and I do not want it to move. So now that I'm getting that triangle closed down on that Peep sight, I'm going to grab a hold of it right here, and I'm actually going to take the tail of my serving material, if I can get a hold of it, and I'm going to run it right up into that triangle. I'm going to wrap it around a couple times, and that's going to make the transition from that triangle to the Peep sight, where I'm going to wrap the tail around the Peep sight itself a couple times, and then we'll make the transition down to the bottom triangle and start closing it in. Oop, I bumped the camera there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to wrap the Peep sight a couple times. Just going to go right around that Peep sight once, pulling that really nice and tight, and twice, and I'm going to hold that, and I'm going to come right up into the bottom triangle. Now I'm just going to come right through there. Same kind of thing I did at the top. Just going to make one or two, and that's just going to transition it to my bottom series of wraps. So I'm just going to pull that just like that, and now I'm going to start wrapping the string. Again, I want to keep this nice and tight, and I want to close that triangle up as much as I can to lock that Peep sight into position. And you can see now, I don't know if you guys can see on the camera, but my D-loop and my Peep sight are almost in line. Hopefully when I relax this string, they'll both stay in line. So I'm going to make 3 or 4 wraps just like that over just the string. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that piece that we cut just a minute ago, if I can find it, here it is, and I'm going to double it over just like that, and I'm going to form a loop in there. Now you want this to be a pretty good size piece of string, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this on here, I'm going to wrap over the top of it, and then I'm going to insert my tail into that loop and pull this back underneath the whole knot, so it basically ties itself closed. So here comes the fire department again. Okay, so you can see I'm wrapping it right around that tail, and the first couple wraps are going to be pretty loose because I don't want this thing twisting around, getting all balled up, and the camera's in the way, so it makes it a little harder. Just like that. And now that I've got a couple wraps on there, I'm going to make sure everything's in line, and I'm going to pull those 2 wraps tight. Now that's going to keep my loop from going anywhere. Now I'm going to continue to do this for the same about 8 to 10, maybe 12 wraps like I did on the top, keeping it nice and tight around the whole thing. Alright, I've been counting loops, but that seems like it's going to be enough. So now that I've got 8 or 10 wraps around it, we've got our tail right here, our loop right there, and we've got our tail. I'm going to run my tail right through the loop, and I'm going to grab a hold of the end of this, and I'm going to pull it so that I'm pulling that tail right back under all those wraps that I just did. And this is why you want this tail to be pretty long, because I've got it tight and I need something good to grip. I can't get it quite to come through, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a screwdriver, or you can use your string separator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tail and I'm going to wrap it around the screwdriver a couple times, and I'm going to tie it in a knot, and I'm going to use this screwdriver basically as a T-handle. Okay, so now that I've got it wrapped around this and I've got it tied in a knot, I'm basically going to use it as a T-handle. I'm just going to hold on to my bow, and I'm going to hold on to the use the T-handle to pull that through there. Nice and slow. You don't want to go too fast, because when that pops loose, it can really get you if you're pulling too hard. So I'm going to pull that tail all the way through, and you can see it pulled it right under there. So I got the same knot top and bottom. Basically what this is a modified hangman's noose. So I'm going to cut that nice and close. Same way on the bottom here. I'm going to cut it nice and close. Then I'm going to take a cigarette lighter, and on my tail I'm going to pull it out away from the string so I don't cause that string to heat up. And I'm going to put a little bit of flame to it and just push it down, and that's going to melt that right back in there, form a nice little mushroom, and that'll keep it from coming untied. Gotta be really, really careful when you do this though. Do not want to catch your string on fire. I have done it in the past and it is not good. Now you can see, let me move my camera here, you can see my peep sight and my D-loop are now on the same plane, so they both go just like this. So now I've got them in a nice tight, or in a nice right situation where when I pull this back, my D-loop and my peep should be lined up, and it should pull that peep sight right around to where I can see it. Okay, so we got to do a little bit of serving on the bottom here as well. Now you don't have to have this pressed to do this, but it does make it to where you can pull your string up a little bit and separate your cables. So it does make it a little bit easier to do. On this we're going to do the exact same thing we did on the last one, except we're not going to be wrapping around the peep sight. So I'm going to grab some serving material here, and again I'm going to use the .019 serving material. That small length that I cut off of our peep sight should work to pull my tail back through. If I can find the spool, here we go. Don't need near as much on this one. We're going to cut off maybe a foot of it on this one, and that's going to be just about it. Okay, so again, we're going to take our tail, or our tag end, and we're going to point it right down toward our cam, and we're going to make a couple wraps here to try to wrap it around so that it's under our wraps. This camera's in a really bad position for this one. Couple wraps there, holding it with our finger to keep it from coming undone. Once you get 2 or 3 wraps on here, you won't have to worry about holding it and keeping it from coming undone. Okay, so at this point we're basically just going to continue right around on this one. We're not going to do quite as many on it, because this is just going to be a short little segment that we're going to serve to keep our rest cord, timing cord, from moving around. So we're going to put about 6 or so wraps on there, and then we're going to pop our tail on the other side. So we're just wrapping the string now. We're not covering the tail at all anymore. We'll do 2 or 3 wraps this way, and then we'll put our loop material in there, and we will wrap half a dozen times over it or something like that. Well, I got a giant piece of loop material this time. This can actually be hard because you got so much stuff in here in your way. So I'm going to lay that right there and just wrap right around that loop half a dozen times or so until I get right up next to the square knot that we tied in our rest cord. I want to be right up against that thing. That's going to be just about as close as we're going to get. So again, I'm going to put my tail right through my loop and not get my rest tail in there. And I'm going to grab hold of my loop and I'm going to pull, and it's going to pull that tail right back under our wrap. Man, that time I didn't need to use the screwdriver. So again, we're going to cut these both pretty close to the string there and just melt them down into a nice little mushroom to keep them from coming unwound. If I can find my lighter. I'm the world's worst about using something, putting it down, and losing it. That's why this lighter doesn't match up to the same lighter you saw a second ago, because I got about 10 of them floating around here. So we're just going to melt both of those back to a nice little mushroom. And right there we go. Put that nice and snug right up against there, and our rest is served in, our Peep is served in, and we're ready to install our sight and start flinging some arrows and getting this thing tuned. That's going to be it for this part of the bow build. The next sight part is going to be just like, hey, guess what I just found? There's my lighter. The next part of the bow build, like I said, we're going to go ahead and put our sight on here, and we're going to go ahead and start flinging some arrows. We're going to make sure everything's lined up and everything's shooting good. We're going to make sure our poundage is okay, and we're going to start tuning on this bow.